What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is the 2023 Acura MDX Type S. So about the Type S version of the MDX here. Well, it's the third Type S model here from Acura in the past year or so. I mean, they're rolling out a ton of them, and so this gives you extra performance as well as extra luxury here in the MDX. And so as far as the look goes, right up front there, you'll see a much more aggressive front bumper here with them extra cutouts for the coolers, because it has additional coolers to cool off this larger turbocharged V6 engine. And so, you know, it gives it a more aggressive front end as a result. You also have a fully open grille there, which also helps with cooling. And you can see the intercooler there in the lower part of the front bumper as well. And I really still love the styling on the MDXs in general, with these slim LED headlights that look really sharp. And also here on the Type S models, you have this gloss black trim for all the accents, and that looks great as well to give a little bit of a more sinister appearance. I also got to say, I still love this Apex blue pearl color you get here on the Type S. It just looks so good, really pops, especially here in the sun. And I also like the Type S badging. You know, they're subtle, but you know, not over the top or anything. You know, I like how you have one there in the grille. You also, coming down to the sides here, have one on the front fender. And another unique thing here for the Type S models is that you have this 21-inch wheel here, and it's wrapped in 275 wide all-season tires, so not the sportiest of setups. But what you can see that's sporty is behind that wheel, you have a Brembo 4-piston brake caliper and a larger rotor as well compared to a regular MDX. And then continuing down the sides, you'll see more of that gloss black trim here on the lower part of the doors, and that is exclusive to the advanced package on top of the Type S version, which gives you a bunch of other extra goodies on the interior. But so that's one extra little touch there. And then going out to the back, you will see that you have the bright chrome polished quad exhaust tips there, and otherwise the rear bumper is basically the same as any other MDX, but cool that you have, you know, those quad exhausts, a little bit of a faux rear diffuser there in the lower part of the rear bumper. And so overall, I think it's just a really nice look. Again, I really like the regular MDX. Having the more aggressive front end here on the Type S, I think looks great. It's obviously not quite as aggressive as what you get on, for example, the TLX Type S, but I still think it nicely sets this apart from the regular MDX, and just really looks good. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The MDX Type S has the new Acura key here, and it does actually have the Type S logo on it there too, which is a really nice touch. And it's a really nice key. It's a little long, but has some nice materials here, some metal on the sides, and a nice substantial weight to it. And overall, a pretty nice key. It's not too big, and you know, fairly slim. Not too bad. So I really do like this key still. But of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the Type S. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And it gives you this really cool sequence here with the gauges and the head-up display and everything. And just, it's very exciting when you start it up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the MDX Type S, my wife and I already did a full interior review on a regular MDX last year for the new 2022s here. So I'll link that video above. You can go watch that for all the details on the spaciousness of the MDX and how this whole interior is laid out, and our deep dive on this interior. But the Type S does have some extra features here. And so on a regular Type S, you'll have leather Alcantara seats, and you still have this Type S flat bottom steering wheel, which is just amazing. It has the perfect 9-3 grips here, just really nicely cut out for your thumbs, and just feels great. And you'll have some other special little touches, but you still need to go to for the advanced package in order to get all the fully loaded features that the Type S offers, that elevates it beyond a regular MDX from a luxury standpoint. So going for the advanced package is a few $1,000s extra, puts this around $73,000 as tested, but it gives you these 16-way seats with this full Milano leather, which has this nice quilting to it. And in addition to having, you know, adjustable bolstering and all kinds of adjustments and being super comfortable with heating and cooling, they also have a 9-mode massage function, which is more than any of the competitors with the amount of modes it has. And as you can see, there's all kinds of different modes. It does both the back and the bottom, and it's really cool. I'll be testing that out during my week here with the MDX Type S, and I'll report back on how those are. But really cool you get that, but that again is only on this advanced package. Another thing that's exclusive to the advanced package is this ELS Studio 3D Signature Edition stereo. It's 25 speakers, over 1,000 watts of power, and that's another thing I'll be testing out during my week with this vehicle, because I really am usually impressed by the ELS stereo systems in these new Acuras. And so this one being the new top version, I'm very, very excited to try that out. Also, it has illuminated speaker grills here, and that's also part of the advanced package, where you have a little bit more extended ambient lighting here that goes down into the center console and stuff, and onto the doors, in addition to just being around the the little dashboard area here like you usually got on an MDX. So that's also a nice little enhancement. Also, the advanced package has some strange features that you wouldn't think would even be options on a vehicle this expensive, or any MDX, honestly. But the advanced package is also the only way you get a heated steering wheel. It's also the only way you get a hands-free rear liftgate with the kick to open functionality. That is only, again, if you go for this extra package on top of the line Type S. It's kind of crazy. You know, you still got to buy options in order to get some things like a heated steering wheel. You should not have to have that as an option on a $66,000 car. But that's the way they set it up. Same thing goes for the surround view camera. That is only on this advanced package, as is the head-up display. And you also, on the advanced package, get this really nice open pore wood trim, which replaces just aluminum that you would normally have on a regular Type S. So that's a nice touch. And so all those things really do make this feel a little more premium inside than a regular MDX, and nicely spruces this up. And I am very excited to try out those extra features with the massage and the awesome stereo. All right, so setting off here in the MDX Type S. So the first thing you notice here, just cruising on a slow park road, is that you still have the very same high seating position here like any other MDX. And actually, with the Type S, you can have it even higher up than a regular MDX if you want, because there's a lift mode here in addition to snow modes and all the other drive modes. But the lift mode actually uses this air suspension, which is also exclusive here to the Type S, to raise the suspension by 2.1 inches over the regular ride height of the Type S here. You also can go down into the Sport Plus mode, and that will drop it 0.6 inches lower than the normal ride height here. And so it's great you have that adjustability, but I mean, no matter what, visibility is still really good here in the MDXs. You'd have a hood that drops down pretty nicely, pretty thin A-pillars. You're sitting up high enough that you don't really have that get in your way too much, although you still do have the mirrors on the doors, which I don't love, but it works okay. View out of the back is great, of course, in typical SUV fashion as well. Other things here, though, that I noticed, so you have a pretty nice, soft, comfortable ride. So they really focused on the Type S, kind of blending both comfort and sportiness, so this isn't like an all-out hard-edged performance version. And they actually say that the sway bars are a little bit softer to give you better stability, but also to give you better comfort. But this air suspension, does a good job of soaking up bumps. You also have adaptive dampers here on the Type S, and those, they say, have like over 50% more damping force than the regular suspension in an MDX and a regular MDX, but it also at the same time has more compliance than a regular MDX. So believe it or not, the Type S will actually be more comfortable than a regular MDX because of all the wizardry going on there with the air suspension and the adaptive damper. So great that you have all of that. Also, in normal mode here, you have pretty nice light steering, and you have a throttle response that is a little bit of a delay. That is one thing I noticed about the TLX Type S as well, where there's a little bit of a hesitation for just a split second before it starts giving you power. It's like you're having to go beyond an on switch, and then it finally is like, okay, now we're responding to your inputs. I'm not sure why. I'll continue to assess that here as I continue to drive more and more. But brakes also actually feel really nice and grabby. It might actually take a little bit of getting used to if you're not used to sporty brakes, but it's just one thing you'll notice, with these bigger 4-piston Brembo brake calipers and the half-inch larger rotors as well, where you definitely have some grabbier brakes here. The brakes in the back, I believe, are the same, but nice you have that extra grab in the front. And they even say that the brake booster here is derived from the NSX as well, so it's definitely a little bit sportier with that brake feel. And they also say the steering has been retuned, so that is unique, by the way, compared to a regular MDX. So that's one thing you'll notice. That, of course, can also be changed here with the individual mode, which is great that you have that, because it means if you want to have the sportiest engine sound and all that, you can have that while still having a nice, soft, comfortable ride. So it's really great they give you that customization. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode, which gives you a boost gauge and lowers the suspension down to its lowest setting. I'm also going to put the transmission into its sport mode. Let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right, nice and responsive. Wow, this thing, it gets up and moves really, really nicely. And it sounds pretty good too. That Sport Plus mode gives you like a 2 decibel louder sound even over the Sport mode, and that pipes in a little bit more sound in the interior and also for the exhaust. It does have an active exhaust. That opens up more. Seeing that boost gauge fling upward whenever you're looking at the gauge cluster here is really cool. So anyway, the MDX Type S here runs the 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine, does 355 horsepower, 354 pound-feet of torque, and it's a strong amount of power. That's like 65 more horsepower than a regular MDX, and like 87 more pound-feet of torque, which, by the way, comes on about 1,400 RPM is when you get that full torque. Also, in Sport Plus mode, it raises your idle to 1,000 RPM, so it means that it's a little bit more responsive, a little bit more ready to go the second you stomp on it. Sport mode also is a little bit of a higher idle, but it's not quite as high as that Sport Plus mode. But anyway, so it gives you about a 5.5 second 0 to 60 time is what Car and Driver got, and it'll go up to 111 mile per hour top speed, which is actually a tiny bit slower than a regular MDX, and that's also a little on the low end for, you know, a sport SUV as far as top speeds go. Not like anyone's really maxing out a top speed, you know, anymore, but just one little thing to note there is that, you know, it doesn't have a whole lot of top end, but you know, it should be plenty of power for anyone who's, you know, doing normal legal speeds. And it feels nice and punchy. So it runs through this 10-speed automatic transmission, which has been beefed up, of course, for the Type S, and they say it has 40% faster downshifts, 30% faster upshifts than a regular 10-speed from Acura. And so, you know, great, you have all those improvements. I'm going to try out some manual shifts here, and we will see how it responds. So it automatically upshifted me to second when I wanted to stay in first. It won't even let me go into first gear. It's 16 miles per hour. Anyway, second gear. Wow, I love how the nose lifts up. Even in Sport Plus mode here, with everything supposed to be in its, you know, stiffest setup, still, you know, gives you a little bit of that drama, which I really like. And it really, the way that it gains speed is very smooth and very stealthy almost, where you don't realize how fast you're going until you look down and you're like, wow, this thing is really moving. I know 5.5 seconds isn't a crazy 0 to 60 time these days, but, you know, it feels pretty good and impressive, honestly. But we're coming up some corners here that I always take, and let's see how the MDX Type S handles them. So we're on 275 wide Continental cross-contact regular all-season tires. So this is not going to be as dynamic as the TLX Type S on its sportier tires, and that vehicle, like I said in my review, had mind-blowing handling. This, you know, obviously, predictably is not going to be as good. These weigh 4,712 pounds. I mean, it's huge. It's, you know, very massive vehicle, but it has a lot of things helping it out. So in addition to that air suspension, the adaptive suspension, you also do have the super handling all-wheel drive, which has a true torque vectoring rear diff, and it can overdrive that inside rear wheel, and it allows you to have 70% of the torque going to the rear in, you know, the optimal conditions, and it can send 100% of that 70% to either one of those wheels. So it really, you know, gives you an impressive torque vectoring sensation. But yeah, these tires, that's where you find the limits. The tires just give up before the you know, all-wheel drive system even has a chance to shine, unfortunately. So I think if you actually do want to do some serious sporting driving in this thing, I would heavily suggest you getting some better tires on it. These tires are really cool though. They're self-sealing tires, which is even better than a run flat. They say you have a better ride quality and better handling than a run flat, but it actually will seal itself up. So hopefully at least minor punctures will be a thing of the past as far as, you know, worrying about having a flat tire. But anyway, try out some more acceleration here, accelerating up a hill. I mean, it still handles fantastically well. And it, yeah, there's still a little more float. I kind of want it to be stiffer. I wish that there was a, you know, I assume Sport Plus mode is as stiff as this thing will go, but, you know, considering how Honda and Acura have such impressive damper tuning with like the Civic Type R going razor sharp stiff, I wish there was a mode for this to really take it to an extreme level, so that you could have, you know, rock hard, you know, suspension setup. I mean, that would be great to really give this a little more body control than what it has currently. I mean, it handles very, very well. For a huge 3-row SUV to be doing what I'm doing is very impressive. I'm not trying to downplay it whatsoever, but, you know, I think it's really, the tires would certainly help if I, you know, had some sportier tires on here, but I still feel like there's a little bit of, you know, wobbliness in the suspension too that I wish, you know, just was a little more aggressive. Still handles itself very, very well, but if you're someone who wants the best handling Type S possible, obviously you can go for the NSX. But aside from that, the TLX definitely is the more impressive handler. I also really love that the TLX had really quick steering. And so, I mean, that vehicle just blew my mind with this handling in that thing. This doesn't have that same quick steering, probably because you're sitting up way higher, and you got to worry about not pitching this thing too much, considering it's an SUV. But it's good handling for sure. It's just you have the limitations of the weight and just the size of this thing that's going to hold you back. So I think with the Type S thing, I think that they tried to be a little milder with this Type S compared to the TLX, and that's fair. It's an SUV, it's kind of a different buyer, but just if you're going into this expecting, something super sporty, it's sporty, but I don't think it's mind-blowing or anything. And I mean, it's certainly better than like a GV80, for example, which is one of the main competitors, the twin-turbo V6 GV80s. Those are going to have a lot softer handling, not going to get anywhere close to this, but it's not really a performance version. You have performance versions of like the Audi Q7, the Mercedes GLE 450, and the BMW X5, which kind of compete with this directly. And I've driven the GLE, I've driven the X5, and they're very impressive vehicles. I think, for example, the E-body control that you had in the Mercedes, where that would actually lean into corners, that was the most mind-blowing as far as SUVs in this segment and handling for those. That thing just handled incredibly well with that very speed, just the way it leaned into corners like you're on a motorcycle was just wild. So for mind-blowing handling in this segment, go for a GLE with that suspension, which was a very rare and expensive option, but that is still the king. But outside of that very rare and expensive version of the GLE, I think this handles really, really well. I still think though an X5 has slightly firmer setups to it, so you can have a little bit of a tighter suspension in that. This definitely, again, is focused on comfort, I think, a little more than I personally would like. But again, for the buyer of this vehicle that probably, has it as a daily driver, doesn't, carve up Tail the Dragon or some intense back road, doesn't autocross it or track it, it still is very comfortable. By the way, I'm now driving on this road that has some potholes and a bunch of uneven pavement and stuff. And even in Sport Plus mode here, it's totally fine. It's not uncomfortable at all. So you could honestly drive this thing around in Sport Plus mode all the time if you want, or even, the Sport mode, which gives you a little bit of a calmer transmission setup so you're not sitting at 3,000 RPMs like I am currently. I'll try out some downshifts here. It's pretty quick, but you can still hear there's a torque converter there that's kind of getting in between, the super razor fast shifts. It's not as good as the ZF8 speed or anything like that. But we'll go down this on-ramp here. Still forces me to go into second gear, but here we go. Okay, it was trying to do an auto upshift for me there. But man, this thing hauls. It really does fly. But yeah, the body moves around a little bit. It adds excitement, so I do like that. But if you're someone who's, again, used to an M Sport package or an AMG version of a GLE or something like that, this is definitely going to feel, I think, a little bit looser. But man, this thing, I can tell this thing just wants to just fly. This thing is strong. I really like how it does feel like it's always eager and ready to just take off, and that power just feels very strong and meaty. And especially in Sport Plus mode here, again, being in the meat of the power band all the time, it really just makes this thing just feel like, it just is so annoyed that you're going slow and it just wants to go faster and faster. But now I'm out here on the highway in the MDX Type S, and it's a really nice highway cruiser as well. I'm now in the individual mode, so I have the comfort suspension set up while still having the sport transmission and engine tuning and all that. And so, I mean, but in comfort mode, this thing just really glides along, even on this part of this road where it's, very unevenly paved, and we're going through construction zones and stuff. It still is pretty quiet in here as well. Nice and smooth, buttery smooth, honestly. It's like silky smooth riding in this thing. Just would be such a great grand tour. But anyway, with the MDX Type S, you also have all the safety equipment as standard here. So you have blind spot monitoring, all those types of things. You have adaptive cruise control with lane keeping assist, and all the usual stuff you'd expect out of a vehicle that's, as expensive as this is, and, competes very well with all the other, vehicles out there. And even a lot of the Germans have a lot of the stuff as an option, and the Type S here, it's standard. So that's great. You don't have to pay any extra for any of that safety equipment, but it all works very well. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here so far on the MDX Type S, but thanks to Acura, I will have this vehicle for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place, then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing, how it compares to its competition, and anything else that I notice here during my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the MDX Type S for a week now, and I've really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun to drive. It's really, really impressive, and I got to play with the handling a little bit more as well, and I'm very impressed with that. Again, it's heavy, it's big, and I still think that there's certain things about the regular MDX, it just feels lighter, and so I think in some instances, especially tighter scenarios, tighter corners and stuff, where I actually do prefer the handling of the regular MDX because it was already so good, that even though yes there's some enhancements here with the Type S, it's just, you know, you still have the extra weight and stuff, that it doesn't feel quite as agile sometimes as a regular MDX, which is, you know, something I wasn't totally expecting. But you know, just one interesting thing to note there. But one thing I do love is this super handling all-wheel drive system, both here in the Type S and in the regular MDX, is so good. And it even got tail happy on me though with the extra power here in the Type S at one point in the rain whenever I was stomping on it with the wheel turned a little bit from a stop, which was unexpected honestly, but really fun as well. And you know, the rest of the whole experience here in the MDX is also top notch here. And all MDXs, again, I just love the steering. I kept coming back to being like, man, like I still love the steering in these things. And Type S here is just as good as the regular MDX in my opinion as far as that goes as well. Although again, it does have some unique tuning, and it felt really good here in this. You know, as long as you're not trying to change direction aggressively, you know, again, because the extra weight, which I really did feel a lot more than I was hoping to. But otherwise, you know, you have this fantastic stereo, which I loved listening to all week. It's right up there. It's one of the best stereos I've ever tested, in my opinion. I mean, I haven't done any of the super high-end exotic stuff, but as far as all the mainstream luxury brands go, you know, it's very impressive. I think it's right up there with some of the best systems, you know, from Mercedes and Audi and BMW. Although I will say that, you know, maybe like the Audi RS7, which is, you know, double the price of this thing, you know, I think that might have this beat a little bit. But I mean, this is really, you know, super good. But yeah, the way this thing accelerates from a dig is really impressive, and I really did love, especially driving around in sport mode. That really gives me the response that I want and that I'm kind of expecting out of a Type S personally. Again, having that branding and that badge really, you know, to me means it's got to be, you know, top notch as far as performance goes. And I think in most ways it is. I still every once in a while do get a little bit of lag though, where it's not consistent, which is the thing that throws it off the most. If it was actually consistently laggy, I could learn to live with it a little bit better. But it's like most of the time I'm like, oh, okay, there's not really any lag in the throttle, and then every once in a while it like just for some reason takes an extra beat or two before it starts giving me the power that I'm looking for. That primarily happens mostly in normal mode, but it still is something that, again, it's not a consistent experience. I'm not sure what happens, if it's just the transmission getting caught off guard for a split second or what, but just one thing that, you know, annoyed me a little bit, but again, a very minor thing I think you could learn to live with. Another thing that you might also be able to learn to live with is this touchpad, which I still think is totally fine whenever you're in Acura's own menu systems, but using CarPlay still is just, it completely throws off the touchpad experience because it doesn't use the same mechanism as it does whenever you're using the regular Acura infotainment system setup. So it means you have to recalibrate your brain every time as far as what you need to do with your finger in order to actually hit the icon you want to hit. It's not great. You know, if we lived in a world with no smartphone integration, I could see this system totally working well for Acura. But, you know, the realities of what people want these days is people just want to have their phone, you know, functionality, and that's it. They don't really care that much about using the actual in-car infotainment stuff very much, at least in my experience from what I've seen. And so, you know, it's not great. Again, you could learn to live with it and learn to, you know, recalibrate your brain every time you're going from one system to the other. But it's just something that's needlessly complicated, and something that all the other competitors, all the Germans, by the way, you know, they were adamant as well about having controller wheels and how they were better than touchscreens, and they all caved as well and went for the touch thing. You know, it's debatable as far as which one works better. You know, Mazda fans are some of the ones that defend the controller wheel the most. And so, you know, it just depends on personal preference, I suppose. But, you know, it just seems like the majority is going with the touchscreen. I wish they would just go with the touchscreen. Bring this screen, you know, a couple inches more forward, and then, you know, it'd be set. Honestly, I'd even live with it in its current position. I'd be more than happy to reach forward and touch this screen if that's what allowed me to use the functionality a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, it's still just a ton of fun, and, you know, the driving experience of the Type S, I think, does outweigh some of those downsides. And I'll get into how this compares to its competitors in a minute. The other one little thing I want to highlight is the massage function, which has more modes than all the competitors, and it felt really good. It was right up there with all the other massages I've tried out for the most part. I haven't done some of the newest stuff like the new S-Class or some of the others, but from the ones I've experienced, this is right up there with the best and is a very nice thing to have, although it still feels a little unnatural at times, but overall is a pretty nice feeling massage. But the last two things I mentioned are the fuel economy and the pricing here of the MDX Type S. So first off, fuel economy. So these are rated at 17 mpg in the city, 21 on the highway, and 19 combined. So in my driving here, I managed to get over about 130 miles of driving I've been doing, which was primarily, you know, around town, suburban, 35 mile per hour, back roads cruising, no stop and go stuff really too much, and, you know, not really any highway driving aside from just a little bit you saw a little bit earlier on. But anyway, so over my driving here, 130 miles, 15.8 mpg is what I'm getting here. So, you know, I mean, that's pretty average with, you know, I typically get 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating in my driving, so I'm only doing 1 mpg less than the city rating, so it could honestly be worse. But, you know, that still is a little low. I mean, the performance and stuff is very impressive. So, I mean, this is basically par for the course, but, you know, it's just something that's going to be a little bit difficult to swallow these days with high gas prices. But you know, again, you have a big three-row vehicle, tons and tons of luxury, tons and tons of space, and lots of performance. You know, it's just the way it goes. So just keep that in mind that I'm getting about, you know, 16 mpg here. And then the last thing to mention is the pricing, how it compares to its competitors here. So this one is a 2022, but pricing has already come out for the 2023s, and that's what you're going to be seeing here on dealer lots very, very shortly, if not already. And so I'm going to talk about 2023 pricing, because it did go up a little bit already for just the one model year, probably partially because of inflation and stuff. But anyway, these start around $68,500, and then this one, as tested, is about $74,300. And so this one has the advanced package. Now, the heated steering wheel and the kick-to-open tailgate are two things you can add on to a regular Type S, the base model, and it's about $500 for the heated steering wheel and a few $100 for the kick to open thing. So thankfully you can get those two things without having to spend an extra $6,000 or whatever. So that's good. But still, like, even like the 360 camera is only on the advanced version here, and that's something, again, we're talking about, you know, high $60,000 vehicles to start. You know, having to nickel and dime people for those few features to, you know, make it go all the way up over 70, you know, I just don't know. I mean, I respect that they're decontenting the Type S for that base version so that people who just care about the performance and want, you know, the big size of the MDX and the performance, you know, they can still get it for a reasonable price, but they don't care about having all the toys. But, you know, it's just a little bit unfortunate that more of that stuff doesn't come standard. But still, even at that higher price tag, these still are very, very competitively priced, and whenever you try and compare this to its competitors, it still does undercut most of them, with the one caveat being the Genesis GV80. The GV80s, you can get fully loaded with their you know, twin turbo 3.5 liter V6 engine, which actually has a little bit more horsepower and torque than this motor. It's way less dynamic though, but if you're just going for something with a boatload of power and comfort, and you want, you know, a good amount of space, the GV80, you can get one of those loaded up again for under 70, and it's just, you know, worth noting that, you know, they do match this on feature content, and they give you the option of having a controller wheel as well as having the touchscreen. And so, you know, I think Genesis has kind of taken the better approach there as well, and you also have the longer warranty with the Genesis and stuff. So if you don't care about performance as much, as far as like handling primarily, I mean, obviously straight line performance will be pretty similar, but, you know, if you care about handling, this I'm assuming will handle better. I have not actually driven the top version of the GV80. I've done the 2.5T, the smaller engine version with rear wheel drive, so a little bit of a lower GV80 that I've tested. But, you know, I'm just assuming that, you know, it's not going to have the super handling all-wheel drive like this does. It has adaptive dampers, and, you know, it has a really nice suspension, but it's not going to be set up for actual performance driving like this is. So, you know, just keep that in mind. But otherwise, if you don't care about that performance part, you know, the GV80 is a very solid competitor. But the other competitors, you know, whenever you look at the BMWs, the Audi, the Mercedes, they're all going to be, you know, anywhere between about $4,000 to $8,000 more expensive than this comparably equipped. And some of them don't even offer some of the stuff that this has, or they, again, the Germans will nickel and dime you for safety tech, they'll nickel and dime you for, you know, all the other features and stuff. And so it just turns out that, you know, this ends up being, you know, a little bit cheaper than those. And obviously you don't have the prestige of those brands. And I will say that, you know, I think that the Mercedes interior interior, and even the BMW interior is probably a little bit nicer, but I honestly think that in some areas this is actually a little bit nicer. Like having all this knee padding here is something you don't really get in a lot of the other competitors, and you know, there's just a lot of nice touches here to the MDX where I think that personally I would probably prefer the way the MDX is set up over the Germans, especially considering the savings, and the fact that you get a little bit more power in this than you do in most of the Germans. Now, I've reviewed the X5 and I've reviewed the GLE 450, and both of those are very impressive, but I think that this feels a little more dynamic than some of those. I think the X5 might handle a little bit better, but the X5, the compromise there is you don't have really as usable of a third row. That's primarily a two-row vehicle. Same thing with the GLE. The third row in both those vehicles is kind of an afterthought, versus in this, it's a really well done third row that actually has real usable space and is done well. So if, you know, it really comes down to how important that third row is to you, but if it is important, I honestly think that this is going to be a lot better than this. Now the Q7 is a little bit more focused on that third row comfort than the X5 and the GLE are, because the Q7 kind of splits the difference between the bigger, you know, X7 and GLS, which this doesn't really compete with. If you do want to compete with those, you know, and actually have a good third row in those Germans, you know, then those are going to be way, way more expensive. But it's just worth noting that this doesn't really have a direct competitor with those, in my opinion. But you know, whenever you do compare the pricing, again, it's just going to come out that the Acura is going to be the better value. You know, if you're just looking for the most features for the least amount of money, and, you know, ticking all those boxes, the Acura is going to do that the best. But overall, I really love how Acura kind of has a foot in both worlds, where, you know, they made the Type S, you know, this super luxurious version of the MDX to compete better with the Germans, but also, you know, added the performance, which I think they took a little further than most of the others. You know, again, like I said, with the Genesis not really offering anything that has the same kind of dynamic qualities this does, and you know, even the Germans, like the X5 has the M Sport package. You can get, like, you know, a few little options you can add on to it, but it's not like a full-blown performance model unless you go for the X5Ms, which are crazy horsepower and crazy amounts of money. And so I really like that this kind of, you know, gives you that actual, like, performance branding and that performance, you know, edge to this, instead of just being, you know, a nice SUV, nice, you know, mid-sized luxury SUV with, you know, one or two packages on it to help you out a little bit. You know, I like how this is, you know, been holistically engineered and, you know, designed to have, you know, the better performance and the better, you know, dynamic qualities than, you know, a regular GLE or a regular X5. And so I think for all those reasons, and the fact that, again, you have a better third row, even though, you know, those have touchscreens, which are a little bit easier to manage than this, I still think overall, personally, I would take the MDX Type S over those competitors. But if you don't need the sportiest handling and you don't need to use a third row, you know, I could certainly see the others making a good amount of sense as well, especially that GV80. I love the GV80s. They're such a good value, and I can certainly see, you know, if you don't need to have awesome handling, you know, go for one of those. But I really love, especially the super handling all-wheel drive system in this, really, with the true torque vectoring stuff, really, you know, sells me whenever I'm pushing this thing and I'm in a hurry. I just love the way you have a more playful back end in this than the others. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the MDX Type S. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Acura for providing me here with the MDX Type S to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.